The phone screen lit up in the dark. Gideon Hart's hands were shaking as he held his wife's phone. His heart beat so hard it felt like it was pushing against his ribs. On the WhatsApp chat, the last message was still fresh. "You did well." He slept fast again. "Same plan tonight. Do not fail." Gideon's mouth went dry. He scrolled up. There were voice notes. There were laughing emojis. There were pictures he did not want to understand. Then he saw one line that made his blood turn cold. "When this is over, you will be free from him for good." Gideon stared at the words like they were fire. Behind him, on the big bed in their Ikoyi home, his wife slept like an angel. Her face was calm. Her breathing was soft. But Gideon could not breathe, because the truth hit him like a slap. All these nights, the sleepy tea, the sweet smile, the gentle kiss on his forehead. It was not love. It was a plan. Gideon looked at her, then at the phone again, and in that moment, Gideon made a decision that would change everything. But he did not know that the next message he would open would even be a saga. 3 months earlier, Gideon Hart was one of the most respected businessmen in Lagos. People knew his name from Victoria Island to Lekki. He owned buildings, hotels, and a big logistics company that moved goods across Nigeria. His life looked perfect from outside, and to be honest, Gideon believed it too. He had a beautiful wife. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield Hart. Eleanor spoke softly. She dressed neatly. She always smelled nice, like clean flowers. She smiled at Gideon in public and held his hand when cameras were near. People called them the Lagos power couple. Gideon liked hearing that. But inside their home, something was off. It started in a small way. Every night, Eleanor would bring Gideon a drink. Sometimes it was tea, sometimes warm milk, sometimes a cup of herbal water she called sleep blend. She would place it on his bedside table and say, "You work too hard, you need rest." And Gideon would smile and drink it. At first, he thought it was his wife been caring, but after some days, he began to notice a strange pattern. He would drink the tea, then his eyelids would become heavy too quickly. His tongue would feel slow, his whole body would feel like a bag of sand. And before he could even say goodnight properly, he would sink into sleep. Deep sleep. The kind of sleep that made the night disappear like it never happened. In the morning, he would wake up and feel confused. Sometimes he would have a headache. Sometimes his mouth would taste bitter. Sometimes his body would feel weak, even though he slept for many hours. He told Eleanor once, "This tea is strong." Eleanor laughed lightly. "That means it is working." Then she added, "Do you not trust me?" Gideon did not want trouble in his marriage, so he said, "Of course I trust you." But in his heart, a small fear started to grow, because Eleanor was also changing. She was always holding her phone, always smiling at messages, always turning her screen away when Gideon walked close. And sometimes, at night, Gideon would wake up for 1 second and feel the bed space beside him empty. Then his eyes would close again, like a hand was pushing them down. He would wake in the morning, and Eleanor would be beside him again. Calm and neat. When he asked, "Did you go anywhere last night?" Eleanor would answer quickly, "No, I slept." Her voice would be too smooth, too fast, like she had practiced it. Gideon tried to ignore it. He wanted peace. He wanted the story the public believed. But peace is hard when your mind is full of questions. One evening, Gideon returned from a business dinner in Lekki. He entered the house quietly, expecting Eleanor to run to him like she used to. Instead, he heard her voice from the sitting room. She was on a call. At first, he thought she was speaking to a friend. Then he heard a man's name. Kwame. Gideon froze near the hallway. Eleanor's voice sounded different. It was not the soft voice she used with Gideon. It was warmer. It sounded like laughter was inside it. She said, "I told you, I will come soon. Just wait." There was a pause. Then Eleanor said, "No, he will not know. He sleeps like a baby." Gideon's throat tightened. His shoe made a small sound on the floor. Eleanor went quiet immediately. When Gideon stepped into the sitting room, Eleanor was smiling again, holding her phone. "Hi, love," she said. "How was your night?" Gideon forced a smile. "Fine." He looked at her phone. "Who were you talking to?" Eleanor did not blink. "My cousin." Gideon nodded slowly, but he did not believe her. That night, Eleanor brought the tea again. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched Gideon closely as he lifted the cup. Her smile was small, careful. Gideon suddenly felt like a child being watched by a teacher. He drank it anyway. He wanted to catch her. He wanted to understand. As his eyes became heavy, Gideon tried to fight it. He tried to hold on to the room, the light, the sound of Eleanor moving, but sleep pulled him down fast. Before he fully closed his eyes, he felt Eleanor touch his cheek, and he heard her whisper something he could not forget. "Good boy." The next day, Gideon did something he had never done in his marriage. He asked his driver to pick him up early from the office without telling anyone. He wanted to go home quietly, to watch, to know. But when Gideon arrived at home, Eleanor was not in the bedroom. Her bag was gone. And the housegirl said, "Madam said she went out for a short visit." Gideon's chest tightened. A short visit to where? Then Gideon noticed something on the sofa. Eleanor's second phone, the one she claimed was just for business. It was buzzing, buzzing again, buzzing again. Gideon picked it up, his fingers cold. The screen showed WhatsApp, and one name sat at the top like a threat. Kwame Mensah. Gideon swallowed hard. He tapped the chat, and the first message he saw made his knees almost give way. "Tonight do the tea again. After he sleeps, bring the file. We finish this." Gideon stared at the words, unable to move, because he suddenly understood something terrible. This was not only cheating, this was something darker, something planned. And Gideon was already part of it, every single night. He scrolled down, and his thumb stopped on a new voice note. It was still loading. Gideon's heart pounded as he pressed play, and the voice that came out next was not Eleanor's. It was a man's voice, calm, confident, and very familiar. Gideon's eyes widened, because he knew that voice. But why would that person be in Eleanor's secret chat? The voice note continued, and Gideon whispered, shaking, "No, this cannot be true." Gideon sat slowly on the sofa, the phone still in his hand. The voice note kept playing. The man's voice was calm, steady, and clear. "Make sure he drinks everything tonight. I cannot take risks anymore. Once the documents are with us, there will be no going back." Gideon felt his chest burn. That voice did not belong to a stranger. It belonged to Nathaniel Cole. Nathaniel Cole was not just anybody. He was Gideon's longtime business partner, the man he trusted with millions, the man who attended his wedding, the man who stood beside him in board meetings and laughed with him over lunch. Gideon's hands started to shake badly. His ears rang. For a moment he thought he would faint. But Gideon did not faint. Instead, something cold entered his heart. Something hard. He stopped the voice note and scrolled up slowly. The messages were many, weeks of conversations, plans, lies, laughing emojis mixed with serious words. Gideon read them one by one. Kwame Mensah was Eleanor's ex, a Ghanaian man she had loved deeply before she met Gideon. The messages showed that Kwame lived in Surulere, and Eleanor had been sleeping there, not once, not twice, almost every night. The tea was never for rest. It was to knock Gideon out, so she could leave the house quietly, so she could go and lie beside another man. Gideon's eyes filled with tears, but none fell. Then he saw something worse. They were not only cheating, they were planning something bigger. They spoke about documents, about shares, about control. They spoke about Gideon like he was an object, not a husband, not a human being. One message stood out. Eleanor wrote, "He trusts Nathaniel fully. Once Nathaniel signs, Gideon will have nothing left." Nathaniel replied, "He will not even know what happened until it is too late." Gideon dropped the phone on his lap. His head felt heavy, so all the times Nathaniel told him, "Sign here, it is routine." All the times Eleanor said, "Trust him, he means well." It was all part of the same plan. Gideon sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. Then he stood up. He walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer where Eleanor kept the tea sachets. He picked one and smelled it. It had no smell, but something inside him screamed danger. He wrapped it carefully and put it in his pocket. Then Gideon did something he never thought he would do. He waited. That evening, Eleanor returned home with a bright smile. She kissed Gideon's cheek and said, "You look tired." Gideon forced a smile. Long day. She watched him closely, like she always did. Then she went into the kitchen. Minutes later, she came back with the familiar cup. The tea. She placed it gently in his hand. "Drink, so you can sleep well," she said softly. Gideon looked at her face, at her eyes, at the woman he married, the woman who promised to love him, the woman who now saw him as an obstacle. He lifted the cup. Eleanor's eyes followed every movement. Gideon pretended to drink, but when Eleanor looked away for 1 second, he poured some into a nearby plant. Then he placed the cup back on the table. "I feel sleepy already," he said. Eleanor smiled. That smile made Gideon sick. She helped him lie down. She turned off the light. Gideon closed his eyes and slowed his breathing. He pretended to sleep. Minutes passed, then more minutes. He felt the bed move. Eleanor stood up quietly. She checked his breathing. She whispered his name once. "Gideon?" He did not answer. She smiled again. Gideon heard her footsteps move away. The door opened, then closed. Gideon opened his eyes. His heart was racing. He stood up quietly, changed his clothes, and followed. He stayed far behind as Eleanor entered her car. Gideon followed her, his hands tight on the steering wheel. They drove through familiar Lagos streets, past shops, past homes. Finally, Eleanor parked near a simple building in Surulere. Gideon watched from a distance. Eleanor stepped out. Then another man came out of the building, Kwame Mensah. He smiled wide and pulled Eleanor into his arms. She laughed, a laugh Gideon had not heard in a long time. Gideon felt something break inside him, but he stayed, because he needed to see everything. Eleanor and Kwame entered the house. Minutes later, another car arrived. Gideon's breath caught. The door opened, and Nathaniel Cole stepped out. Gideon's vision blurred. All three of them, together, in one place, laughing, talking, planning. Gideon's hands shook as he lifted his phone and took pictures, clear pictures, proof. But as he was about to leave, his phone vibrated. A message popped up, from Eleanor. "Did you sleep well, my love?" Gideon stared at the screen, because he knew one thing now. They thought he was asleep. They thought he was weak. They thought he knew nothing, and that mistake was going to cost them dearly. But Gideon did not know that inside that house, the next conversation would change the plan completely. Because someone had just suggested something even more dangerous, and Gideon was already too close to escape. Gideon stayed inside his car, parked a little distance away. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, but his eyes were sharp. He watched the building. The lights inside the small flat were on. Shadows moved behind the curtains. Laughter came out sometimes. That laughter cut Gideon deeply. This was not a mistake. This was not confusion. This was planning. Gideon took a deep breath and lowered his seat slightly so no one would notice him. He waited. Inside the house, Eleanor sat close to Kwame on the couch. Nathaniel stood near the window, holding a glass of juice. Nathaniel spoke first. "We are running out of time." Kwame nodded. "Gideon is careful, but he trusts you. That is our biggest advantage." Eleanor crossed her legs slowly. "He suspects nothing. The tea works every time." Nathaniel looked at her. "Are you sure the dosage is correct?" Eleanor smiled. "He sleeps for hours. He does not even turn." Kwame laughed. "The man is too comfortable." Nathaniel did not laugh. Instead, he said, "Comfort makes people careless, but we must finish this cleanly." Eleanor leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel lowered his voice. "The shares. Once Gideon signs them over, the company is gone. After that, he becomes a problem." Eleanor froze for 1 second. "A problem how?" Nathaniel replied calmly, "A man who loses everything will start asking questions." Kwame added, "Or fighting." Silence filled the room. Eleanor swallowed. "So what is your solution?" Nathaniel looked at both of them. He should not be in the picture anymore. Gideon, sitting in his car, felt his heart stop. His ears rang. He leaned closer to the window, straining to hear. Kwame frowned. "That sounds dangerous." Nathaniel turned to him. "Everything we are doing is dangerous, but the reward is big." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. You said this was just about control, about money. Nathaniel replied, plans grow. That is how business works. Gideon's mouth went dry. So this was it. It was not just cheating. It was not just stealing. It was removal. Gideon was no longer a husband or a partner. He was an obstacle. Inside the house, Eleanor stood up and walked slowly around the room. I did not agree to hurt him, she said quietly. Kwame stood too. Then why drug him every night? Eleanor snapped. I did it so he would not follow me. Nathaniel stepped closer to her. You already crossed the line, Eleanor. There is no going back. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. He trusted me. Nathaniel replied, cold and firm. Trust is useful until it is not. Outside, Gideon felt sick. His chest hurt. His legs felt weak. But he stayed, because he needed to hear everything. Nathaniel continued, Tomorrow night I will bring the documents. Eleanor, you will make sure he signs. Eleanor shook her head. What if he asks questions? Nathaniel smiled. He will not. Not in that state. Kwame added, And after? Nathaniel paused. After that, we decide the final step. Gideon's hands shook so badly he almost dropped his phone. Final step. He took more pictures, recorded a short video. Every word felt like fire entering his body. Suddenly, Gideon's phone vibrated again. Another message, from Eleanor. I miss you already. Gideon stared at the screen. He felt anger rise like heat. He typed nothing. He turned off his phone. Inside the house, Eleanor walked to the window. She looked outside for a moment. Gideon quickly leaned back. His heart was pounding. Had she seen him? Eleanor closed the curtain. Then she spoke softly. I will go back before morning. He must not suspect. Kwame hugged her. Be careful. Nathaniel added, Remember, tonight's tea must be stronger. Gideon froze. Stronger. His breath caught. Eleanor picked up her bag. I know what to do. She walked toward the door. Gideon started his car quietly. He watched Eleanor step out of the building. She looked calm, beautiful, dangerous. She entered her car and drove off. Gideon followed at a distance. Back at their Ikoyi home, Eleanor entered first. Gideon waited, then entered quietly through another door. He lay on the bed pretending to sleep. Minutes later, Eleanor came in. She stood over him, watching. Too long. Then she whispered, I am sorry. Gideon's heart skipped. Was that guilt or fear? She turned and went into the kitchen. Gideon heard the sound of water, the clink of a spoon. The familiar routine, but this time Gideon knew. This tea was not just to make him sleep, it was something more. Eleanor returned with the cup. She placed it on the table beside him. Drink, my love, she said gently. Gideon opened his eyes slowly. He looked at the cup, then at Eleanor, and for the first time he spoke with calm danger in his voice. Why are you shaking? Eleanor froze. Her hand slipped slightly. The tea spilled a little on the table. Her eyes widened, because in that moment Eleanor realized something terrible. Gideon was not asleep, and he had heard enough. Eleanor's lips trembled. She tried to smile, but it came out wrong. I am not shaking, she said quickly. You scared me. Gideon sat up slowly. The room felt very quiet. Too quiet. He picked up the cup of tea and looked at it carefully. Then he looked back at Eleanor. You always shake like this now, Gideon said. Every night. Eleanor swallowed. You are imagining things. Gideon placed the cup back on the table without drinking it. I am not thirsty tonight, he said. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the cup, then back to his face. That tea helps you sleep, she said. You need rest. Gideon leaned closer to her. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. Why do I always sleep so fast after I drink it? Eleanor stepped back a little. You work too much. Your body is tired. Gideon nodded slowly. Then why do I wake up confused every morning? Silence. Eleanor's fingers curled into her palm. Gideon stood up from the bed. He was taller than her. He looked down at her and said, Where do you go at night? Eleanor's face changed. Her eyes hardened. You are spying on me now, she snapped. Gideon shook his head. I followed you. Eleanor's breath caught. Gideon continued, Surulere, a small flat. Kwame Mensah. Eleanor froze like stone. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Gideon took out his phone and placed it on the bed. He opened the gallery. Pictures appeared on the screen. Eleanor and Kwame hugging. Nathaniel entering the same house. Eleanor's knees weakened. She sat down slowly. You should not have done this, she whispered. Gideon laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. You drug me every night, he said. You lie to me every day. But I should not have looked. Eleanor covered her face. Tears began to fall. I was trapped, she cried. I made a mistake. Gideon's voice rose. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. This is planning. Eleanor looked up suddenly. Her tears stopped. Her face became cold. You were never there for me, she said. You only cared about work. Gideon stared at her. So you decided to destroy me? Eleanor stood up. You were safe. You were sleeping. Nothing happened to you. Gideon's chest tightened. Nothing happened, he repeated. You used me like an object. Eleanor crossed her arms. Kwame understands me. Gideon stepped back like he had been hit. So this is love, he asked quietly. Eleanor did not answer. Gideon picked up his phone again. You planned to steal my company, he said. With Nathaniel. Eleanor's eyes widened. You read the messages. Yes, Gideon said, all of them. Eleanor rushed toward him. You do not understand. Nathaniel forced this. Gideon laughed bitterly. Forced you to drug me? Eleanor shouted. You do not know everything. She grabbed the teacup suddenly. Gideon's heart jumped. Eleanor raised it and said, If you drink this, everything will be fine. Gideon shook his head slowly. Put it down. Eleanor's hand shook badly now. You are ruining everything, she cried. Gideon took a step closer. I am ending it, he said. In that moment, Eleanor's phone rang. They both froze. The screen lit up. Nathaniel Cole calling. Eleanor looked at the phone, then at Gideon. Her face was full of fear. Gideon pointed at the phone. Answer it. Eleanor hesitated. The phone kept ringing. Finally, she answered. Yes, she said softly. Nathaniel's voice came through loud and clear. Did he drink it? Gideon felt his heart stop. Eleanor looked at Gideon. Her lips shook. Nathaniel continued, because tonight it must be stronger. Gideon stepped forward and took the phone from her hand. He spoke into it slowly. No one is drinking anything tonight. Silence. Then Nathaniel spoke again, calm and sharp. So you finally woke up. Gideon closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, he said, I know everything. Nathaniel replied, Then you know you are already late. Gideon's blood ran cold. Late for what? He asked. Nathaniel paused, then said quietly, Check your office email. The call ended. Gideon's hands shook as he opened his phone. New messages filled the screen. Bank alerts, share transfers, authorizations. His name was everywhere. But the control was gone. Gideon looked up at Eleanor slowly. She was crying again. But Gideon could not tell if the tears were real. Because one truth was clear now. They had already started the final step. And Gideon had very little time left. Gideon stared at his phone for a long time. His hands were steady now, too steady. The fear had changed into something else, focus. He looked at Eleanor. She was crying softly, sitting on the edge of the bed like a child who had been caught. But Gideon no longer saw her as weak. He saw her as dangerous. Get dressed, Gideon said calmly. Eleanor looked up. What? Get dressed, he repeated. We are going out. Eleanor shook her head. It is late. Gideon's voice was firm. Now. She stood up slowly and went to the wardrobe. As she dressed, Gideon walked into his study. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small black book. Inside were names, contacts, numbers he had saved for emergencies but never used. Gideon made a call. Hello, Mr. Adeyemi, he said. I need you tonight. He ended the call and made another, then another. Within minutes, things began to move. When Eleanor returned to the living room, Gideon was already wearing his jacket. You are coming with me, he said. Where? She asked. To hear the truth, Gideon replied. They drove through quiet Lagos streets. No music, no words. just the sound of the engine and Eleanor's uneven breathing. They arrived at Gideon's office on Victoria Island. The lights were on. Security opened the gate quickly when they saw Gideon. Inside the building, 3 men were waiting. One was Mr. Adeyemi, Gideon's lawyer. Another was Mrs. Clark, his finance head. The third man stood near the window. Nathaniel Cole. Nathaniel turned and smiled. "Gideon," he said calmly. "I hoped you would come." Eleanor gasped. Gideon did not greet him. He walked to the table and sat down. "Sit," Gideon said to Eleanor. She obeyed. Nathaniel looked amused. "You are calm for a man who just lost everything." Gideon looked up. "Lost?" Nathaniel spread some papers on the table. "Your shares, your authority, signed." Gideon nodded. "Yes." "Signed." Nathaniel smiled wider. Then Gideon added, "Signed under false authority." Nathaniel's smile paused. Mrs. Clark stepped forward. "The documents were flagged 2 hours ago." Nathaniel turned sharply. "Flagged?" Mr. Adeyemi spoke. "The signatures were approved using a private code only Gideon knows." Nathaniel's face changed. "That is not possible," he said. Gideon leaned forward. "The tea made me sleep. It did not make me foolish." Eleanor covered her mouth. Gideon continued, "Every document you touched tonight was a trap." Nathaniel stepped back slowly. "You are lying." Gideon pressed a button on the table. A screen lit up. Audio played. Nathaniel's voice filled the room. He should not be in the picture anymore. Eleanor began to cry loudly. Nathaniel's face went pale. Gideon stood up. "You planned to steal from me," Gideon said. "You planned to erase me." He turned to Eleanor. "And you helped." Eleanor dropped to her knees. "I was scared," she cried. "Kwame pressured me. Nathaniel scared me." Gideon looked down at her. "You drugged me," he said quietly. "Every night." Silence filled the room. Gideon turned back to Nathaniel. "Security has already contacted the authorities," Gideon said. "They are on their way." Nathaniel laughed weakly. "You think this is over?" Gideon replied calmly. "For you, it is just beginning." Minutes later, the doors opened. Men in dark suits entered. Nathaniel tried to speak, but no words came out. He was led away. Eleanor stayed on the floor, shaking. Gideon watched as Nathaniel disappeared. Then he turned back to Eleanor. "You will answer for your part," Gideon said, "but not here." Eleanor looked up at him. "Do you hate me?" Gideon paused. "I feel nothing," he said. That hurt her more than shouting. Weeks later, Lagos was full of news. A billionaire saved his company at the last minute. A trusted partner arrested. A wife exposed, but behind closed doors, Gideon sat alone in his home. No tea, no lies, just silence. He looked at the empty space beside him on the bed. And for the first time in a long while, Gideon slept. Not because of drugs, but because the truth had finally come out. Thanks for watching. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? Do well to let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. Stay blessed.